Welcome, Reanimated fans, to this week's episode. I am H.A. Conrad here from Brooklyn, and on the West Coast is my intrepid co-host, Stuart Tiffin. Hey, Stuart.
Good day.
We are day 70 plus or 80 plus into quarantining here in Brooklyn, but only day 76 into the Daily Cheeseball videos. Though today would be 77, I think. Lots of stuff going on this week. It's been a hard week for many reasons, and at least here in New York, there had been a lot of sort of arrests and sort of uneven application of police force in different neighborhoods, depending on how diverse the neighborhood was, and whether people were wearing masks or not, and coming down on people when they hadn't been honestly doing anything any differently than people in other parts of the neighborhoods are. So needless to say, there's a lot of things going on, and there's a lot of reasons that it's built up to this point. It's pretty awful. The rioting that's been, and look, the majority of people have been actually peacefully protesting, and they have every right to do that. And there is definitely some people inciting the looting and things like that. We had a pretty rough night here in Brooklyn, in our neighborhood, basically, just down the street from us in Flatbush. Apparently, the police went through, we're driving through barricaded people. It's just sort of hard to believe that it's all happening. But I also would say not surprising in terms of the stuff that we've been seeing in New York based upon the quarantine. There was like a neighborhood where people were just like out and they were getting taken down by police because they weren't wearing masks. And in this case, I think there are probably a few people inciting some of the violence, but it's also it's not just here. It's kind of across the U.S. at this point. So
totally, yeah. It's in Center. It's not in my little town, thankfully. Super grateful to live in a small town right now, but it's in the closest city to me, 15 minutes away. There were all night, basically. I was looking at Twitter around 12:30 a.m. and people were still downtown with SWAT.
Right.
So it's even in little cities of 150,000. It's all over. Right.
And in addition to all of this going on, we've seen like crowds and crowds and crowds of people here in New York. We had the numbers going down, and I'm wondering if it's going to go up now.
Well, we got to wait 2 weeks or so.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. In terms of COVID in general, at least in New York, cases have gone down to the lowest at this point than they've been. But let's be clear, they're still not like gone. So there's an interesting thing that I think we're going to be seeing in this country, and we have been seeing it in places that have opened up. The cases have definitely gone up. I've been a lot concerned about some of the reporting, especially like in Georgia. There's been a lot of people that say that the official numbers are not correct and that they've not been reported. Same thing in Florida. And the thing is, with a public health crisis, you can't afford to cover things up at this point because you won't have a handle on it. And yeah, I get it. I get that people are tired of being inside and this is hard, but I just worry that we're going to see a much longer process now, and all the stuff that we did before is just sort of for naught. I hate to be negative about it, but it kind of feels that way, at least here in New York. Though they do say that phase 1 of reopening is supposed to be happening.
What does phase 1 mean for you?
So phase 1 is sort of more essential things, like I think they're allowing certain businesses to reopen. I work at a law firm, so my business is in like phase 2. But my firm basically says that we're probably not going back, because they're concerned about putting people at risk. Especially of concern is the issue with the subways, because probably one of the worst things that you could do, in terms of spreading this virus is get on a small enclosed, poorly ventilated, or even semi-ventilated area. So I don't know if you've seen some of what they've been saying is that, if you have to go one stop, that's one thing. But if you're riding on the train for an hour, you're putting yourself at a much higher risk. So my firm is taking that very seriously, and they don't, everybody's working fine from home for now. So I think that they're just going to kind of play a wait and see game. And they don't want to go back in until things are safer. And aside from that, there's actually a lot of things to do with the building itself. So This has been a concern for buildings, probably, I would imagine, not just in New York, but any big corporate buildings. The HVAC systems have been sort of down at a lower level because of people aren't in the building. But the problem with that is that apparently it puts the risk of Legionnaire's disease developing
Oh, for fuck's sake.
at a much higher, it's like a big risk. So now they have to do like air testing and testing in all these buildings to make sure that that's not happening. It's sort of like all of these problems compounded, and it doesn't make anybody feel extraordinarily confident about going back to the office at the moment. And then the other thing that has been discussed, and this is going on in New York in general, is like staggered work hours. Like, how do you stagger the work hours? Like, what do you do? Tell X, Y, and Z businesses that people can only come in at this time? Is there staggered? Like, because what you really want to do is avoid that rush hour.
Yep.
So lots of things to consider, but I definitely don't think we're back yet. That said, the weather is nicer. There is weirdly like a pretty big split between people that are still taking it very seriously, still the majority of people wearing masks in my neighborhood, with a very few people kind of defying that and being like scoffing at that. And weirdly, I don't know, like you probably have not seen this because it's not as dense in your neighborhood, so you don't like walk out on sidewalks and stuff, but there's been a couple of weird interactions I've had with people. Like, the people not wearing masks really want to make it clear that they're not wearing masks and that they're defying whatever advice is happening. And one guy yesterday said something like, don't you know the UV light will kill it? Or something weird like that to me. And I'm like, what?
In 30 minutes is what I've seen.
Not like immediately. So anyway, so that's going on.
So in other COVID news, before we get off the topic, yesterday was a huge day for new cases globally. I think a big mover for that was Brazil, which reported 33,000 new cases yesterday, which I think is probably a record for one country single day. I don't think we ever got above 30.
Well, but I also think Brazil, there's been, Bolsonaro,
there's huge
their
question
president,
marks with Brazil, obviously.
Yeah. He basically has called it fake news, and that if people are going to die, they're going to die. And I don't know. I just think that we're probably, unfortunately, going to just see this kind of continue until there's a vaccine. And even then,
California is just still, we're opening up, but we're still looking at a lot of new cases. We passed the 100,000 case mark this week. But I think I'd like to move on from COVID to more zombie-related news.
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
Okay. The one other big story for COVID-related was that in those Memorial Day pictures and videos of those pool parties in the Ozarks.
My God.
Saw that news story that dropped this week, that there was at least one COVID positive person
We
who
all-
went to
we-
like 5 different bars that weekend.
We all know that there was a lot more than one. They just managed to like highlight that dude. But not
there's
shocking.
There's a chance that since a lot of this was outdoor bar situations, except I think he was at like a Chili's or something. No,
I don't
Buffalo
know.
Wild Wings. There's a chance that he wasn't, in an enclosed space with all those people. But oh man, that could be a real mess.
Well, I don't know. I saw those photos, and those people were all so close to each other with no masks. I think it's a pretty good, despite being outdoors, I still think it's a probably pretty good likelihood that a lot of them got it. So, anywho. Let's talk about more fun stuff. I don't know if you got to read through the article, but there was a Cineblend article about The Walking Dead, and there was just like a few weird behind the scene like stories about the show. I think most of them I knew. The one which maybe I knew and I forgot was that I guess when they first pitched the show, they had originally wanted it to be a zombie crime procedural where they solved a different zombie crime or death every week, which I thought was like weird. And then there was another question that was like, does the show actually have to have zombies in it? which I thought was pretty funny. And then there was like a couple of other things, which I guess I didn't realize that Norman Reedus wasn't working. Like, apparently the majority of the cast and crew had been working together in pre-production for a really long time before he came on board. And it actually helped build his character because he had a bit of a chip on his shoulder because he was definitely like the outsider coming in. I guess I didn't realize the timing of it. I had already thought that he was part of it from the beginning, and he wasn't. And I guess I forgot that this was not supposed to be necessarily a character was going to stick around quite as long as he did. And he even didn't know. And so that was kind of interesting.
I like this one that Tom Jane was originally considered for Rick Grimes. Honestly, I kind of like Tom Jane better than Andrew Lincoln at the offset.
I don't know. Andrew Lincoln's got the crazy eyes. I don't know. I love it.
Tom Jane, though, oh god, Tom Jane just has the look, I think, better from the comics. He's
he does look like that. Yeah,
he is so amazing in The Expanse that I just think he's a terribly underrated actor and who needs to do more high profile things.
But think about it this way: if he had ended up being cast in this,
he couldn't have done The Expanse, and
he wouldn't have been able to do The Expanse. And that I don't know that show would have worked.
Maybe
quite
Andrew
so
Lincoln
well.
could have been the detective. Well, what was that guy's name in The Expanse?
I don't know, but he was good.
He's so good.
I love that show. I have to rewatch that. I digress. The other thing you found was a trailer for is it just called Alive?
And maybe hashtag Alive.
Hashtag Alive. And you know,
it looks very similar to that other film, Alone, or I'm not remembering. We just talked about it a couple weeks ago. Where they're looking at an October release for it. Two people people trapped in their apartments, which is also funny because of what we've been doing for the last 3 months.
Yeah, definitely. But I actually really liked this trailer. I thought it looked pretty good. The action scenes look amazing.
Off the balcony, those shots. Yeah,
that was awesome. So I'm excited. I can't wait to see whatever this is.
And then this final one is a bit of a tickler. So there's another zombie show coming to Netflix. So hooray,
Mm-hmm.
Stuart and HA have reason to live into June with more zombie content coming out. But what's weird about it is it's a Brazilian, potentially just a remake or maybe a spin off of Dead Set, which you and I have reviewed and enjoyed quite thoroughly.
I mean, I enjoyed it. I'm not sure that this has legs for entire. I guess maybe it has like a different twist, sort of.
Yeah.
But it looks very similar, though. I mean, look, Dead Set was a while ago, so maybe they're going to figure out some new cool things to do with this one.
Yeah.
But I'm down with it. I'm cool with it. Let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's watch it.
So that's coming out. I forget. Wait, no, I said it's like June 10th, I think. That one's coming pretty soon. And then I've also been, in the last couple months, there's been some other end of the world type stuff that I wasn't sure if you had seen, but that has resonated with me. So one of them is on Epix. There's not a lot of original content on Epix, and different channels are always trying to sell you it. It's I think it was free with something that I got. So I got to watch all of War of the Worlds, which is a original series from Epix. British War of the Worlds, modern day, not the H.G. Wells original.
Oh.
Very international. It's not very. It's basically France and the UK, and I don't think there's another setting, but it's set in both of those countries. And honestly, it was a pretty good first season. It definitely set up as if there's going to be a second, but we'll see. I take it by your reaction that you haven't seen any of it, so I will not go into more spoilers, but it was very arresting. I was impacted by it, in part because they don't pull any punches, and they're just, sometimes end of the world stuff it can be light. This is not not light.
Well, I for whatever got sucked into watching Armageddon the other day. I don't know how it came up. I think Bill was listening to some podcast where they were talking about it. And, it's kind of like a never-ending trailer. Like, every scene is cut so quickly. They're always out of time. It's like, we got no time. Like, 10 times they say that when clearly they must have some time to be able to say they have no time. It is, it is exactly what it was always supposed to be, which is this sort of like never-ending action film where Bruce Willis is Bruce Willis.
And
But
you got that
anyway.
Aerosmith musical
Yeah.
interlude.
Well, because Liv Tyler's in it, so hey.
Yeah. And Ben Affleck.
Ben Fleck, yep.
The other series that I just finished this week was Into the Night, which is on Netflix, and it's kind of like a mini series. It's super French, actually. Well, it's kind of set in Belgium, but the cast it's mostly in French. Everybody, like, French is weirdly the lingua franca
Mm-hmm.
instead of English, except for when they actually interact with some Brits who don't speak French, which I thought was, if only they'd had an American who didn't speak any languages either, it would have been very true to life. But Into the Night, I recommend it heartily. It is a good sort of thriller. It basically does pull punches that it's the end of the world. You don't feel that quite as starkly as with War of the Worlds.
Uh,
But if you're into some end of the world stuff, those are two that I just watched, and then also Contagion. I broke down and finally I watched it again.
I don't need to watch it again. But I did watch, after our conversation, I did watch the first I think 4 episodes of What We Do in the Shadows, the series. And it's really awesome. There's so many good parts to it. And the cast is incredibly good. I particularly like the weird little the cosplayers that are in it, how they're kind of like stalking them. They're the LARPers. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like,
yeah, he's got to find some virgins. He's like, I think I have a source.
And Beanie Feldstein, who I loved in Booksmart, and I had actually not seen her until Booksmart. She's Jonah Hill's sister. She is one of the main LARPers, which I just really liked. So anyway, I'm going to continue to watch that and keep it light, but maybe I will check out some of this. I do want to see the War of the Worlds. That kind of seems interesting.
It's just a little bit hard to get your hands on it without paying extra to Epics, which then you can get a 7-day free trial with them through Amazon Prime, but then I would say there's not enough content on there to continue.
Yeah.
My take. So.
All right. Well, maybe I'll check it out and see what we do. But are you ready to chat about what we are reviewing today?
Sure. Yeah, we dove into some new stuff today. So yeah, let's talk about Betaal.
Yeah. So Betaal is a series on Netflix. We had mentioned this when it first got released, and finally we're getting around to watching it. We watched the first couple of episodes. Are there only 4 episodes or 5 episodes of this?
There are 4 episodes.
This was the first aired May 24th, so it has not been out that long. The creator was Patrick Graham, and it's in India. And it is subtitled, which was fine. It has like a really, like, a pretty big cast, at least, in the beginning.
Yeah.
And and I felt like it set up everything pretty quickly and pretty well. Like, it is not a slow burn, or at least I didn't find it in the first episode anyway. Second episode, it starts to slow down a little bit, but the first episode, they kind of like go right off the bat. So
you gotta charge right in there. How did you handle the Hindi and I think there's probably a third language other than English being spoken to by some of the tribal folk?
I was fine with it. I mean, I was watching the subtitles, but they'll throw in an English word in there every once in a while, which is it's kind of funny which ones they are.
Yeah.
But I thought that was fine. It's no different than watching any other film with subtitles for the most part. I will say, like, I really like the beginning. I'm like, oh man, they're just like hitting the ground running. And basically, they do the whole sort of like setup in this village where they're like, the sort of intro is like all these like kind of fast cuts of like, weird red zombie maggots and stuff like that. and you know something's going on. They're giving you the background. And it's basically this village that is like they are kind of the village elders, I think, are kind of appeasing something. So you know something's going on immediately. I thought that the setup was pretty good, especially with the village elder auntie. And it's creepy, and they do a really good job, I thought, at like just kind of creeping you out. I mean, you kind of know it's coming, but you know she's under a veil, so like she's kind of communing with this weird spirit zombie guy who is the there's a lot of colonialism things going on here. So like I liked the setup. It was pretty much like they've kind of been handling this curse for a really long time. This is like they're in this backwoods village basically, and the deal is that like a developer is trying to build a road through their mountain, and I think that the village is viewed as sort of this backwater with like peasants or like the poor people that don't know what they're talking about. They also make reference to basically these rebels.
Noxals, yeah.
Yep.
And I had to look that one up, but Noxals are apparently a real thing in India, and this is like still active. Basically, they're usually attributed to or associated with Marxism or communism, and they're kind of like just partisans who fight the power. And frankly, when I spent some time in India, 15 years ago or so now, I remember seeing it in the media while I was there that there were like these clashes between villagers with bows and arrows, and then like rifle wielding quasi military police near a factory or something. So this clash of like industrialization and real backwoods is an ongoing narrative that I think. So this is actually pretty true to life in some ways, which is what makes it, I guess, pretty scary.
Right. There's like a big statue to Betaal, who is this colonel, John Lyndoch, who was in command of or under the British East India Company, and so basically the whole deal is that his spirit and like his troops have been locked in this mountain since that time, and if they're let out, obviously all hell will break loose. So you've got the company who really wants to get through this mountain, but they are getting resistance. Like the people in this village are like, yeah, no, do not open this up. And they think that it's sort of a resistance, like a normal resistance. So they bring in the troops. And that's kind of like, I did like how they set it up. Like the troop thinks it's one, like everybody thinks it's one situation, but it's actually this other thing.
Yeah. So the main antagonist is the Surya construction guy, Mudhalvan.
Yeah.
He's the big boss. He's kind of like the only real representative of that company, but he's also the boss of the company. He's there with his wife and daughter and his helper man. And then there's a bunch of like construction workers too. And then once the military show up, or the cops, counterinsurgency force, there's a ton of them, and it's pretty tough to figure out who's who until probably second episode, because like you said, by then you've whittled down the cast enough that you can start putting names to people. And even then, by the end of the second episode, there's still one guy who I'm not sure what his name is.
Well, I mean, the main leader of this police department, and it's a fictional one. It's like counterinsurgency police department. So they go around with logos that say CIPD. Their commander is Tyagi, who is
Tyagi ma'am.
Yep. And she's like pretty hardcore. You get introduced to her because she's like talking about, she's very much like, we're the ones that are keeping everybody safe.
That interview is hilarious, where the anchor is talking to a professor who's like, hey, be nice to the indigenous, or like to the people in the woods, and the guy calls him liberal scum.
Yes.
Or something.
And she kind of does too. And then it immediately cuts to like her squad, the Baz squad, and they are basically cheering her on and whatever. And then we find out that they're going to go off into these particular woods and help them with this mountain.
And we've got new recruit Nadir Haq. Is it Nadir or Navir? Shows
Nadir.
up. We've got Sarohi, Vikram Sarohi, who's the hero, and he is second in command under Tyagi ma'am. And then his I guess third in command, but I think he calls her deputy or something, is, I don't really know. It's like Alua Walia.
Yeah, but they call her Alu. They call her Alu, too.
She's super badass looking, and she seems like she's always kind of dialed up to 11 on intimidation and hardcoreness, except in the second episode, she kind of changes it up a bit, or actually later this episode, she's like, let's not do the dangerous things. Let's be right. Cool. Sarohi is a weird character because he's like varies between looking like he's gonna crap himself and just doing the brave things all the time.
Yeah, and actually the interesting thing about his second in command, Alu, is that she's constantly being like, Sarohi, don't do that. Like, she's always this like voice of reason that he never listens to. No. So that is always kind of funny.
And also, he gets certainly we're kind of jumping around, but I hope you're okay with that. But Sarohi in the second episode is made, I think, pretty well by the writing to look completely insane, even though we know he's right. I mean, to outside perspective, to Alu, he's unhinged, and so she goes from telling him not to go into the dark tunnel where people have been going in and dying, to then saying, you know what, I don't think you're fit to lead anymore. So it is kind of an interesting relationship between the two of them, right? Which I kind of liked.
The other thing I would say is that Tyagi mom, she's definitely colluding with the construction company. They're doing things that they're not supposed to do, like ethically and morally. They are doing things that are not actually sanctioned. So, and part of why she's cool with doing that with this particular squad, they're implying, and you see like a couple of flashbacks with Vikram, that something really bad went down before all of this happened. Which means that maybe they're colluding because they have to, or they're more likely to fall in line with her because they did something bad before. We haven't yet fully gotten the whole story, but there's flashback.
The flashback keeps changing too. Like in one of them, the girl seems to be a zombie, and I'm like, oh wait, have they done zombie stuff before?
Yeah, it's really weird. So I guess maybe we'll find out more in the next couple episodes, but there's definitely some shady stuff going on. And so initially the squad was supposed to basically just relocate, quote unquote, relocate the village, and they're doing it in some pretty horrible ways. Like, they, at first it seems like they're just trying to like get them onto the buses and whatever. But then you've got Akbar, who is his cousin Hawk, is the newest recruit. And there's this whole horrible scene where he's like basically beating this old man, and Vikram like tells him to stop. And he's like, oh yeah, okay, sorry, uncle. And then at the minute Vikram keeps walking, he starts beating him again. And it's like, oh God. So there's definitely some shadiness going on, and we hear that not just through like there's a couple of asides with Tyagi and the main guy, the corporate dude, Mudhalvan, basically saying, are we sure that they're going to be able to do it? And she's like assuring him, oh yeah, this squad will do what they're supposed to do. And, so there's definitely something shady going on that we hear. And then as the squad gets into relocating the village, they run into this issue where basically a group, including Auntie and the younger woman who we followed through the
still don't really know her name even by episode 2, right?
Right. I don't think we do. No. Not yet. And
she's the one with the face tattoos and the headband.
Yep, and the little scythe thing in her hand. Yeah. But she basically, along with Auntie and a few of the villagers, are standing right in front of the tunnel, and this is where things really start to go off the rails, because this squad isn't supposed to take them out. They're not shooting at them. So if they're not supposed to basically take them down, and then Tyagi basically says, yeah, just blow them all away. Even if they haven't shot at you, you need to blow them all away. And this is where basically Alu is like, no, Vikram, don't do it. Like, this is a bad thing. There is an explosion, which is not from the villagers, but that gives the squad the kind of an excuse to take them down. Our little scythe woman with the tattoos, she basically is able to get away, but Auntie has told them that there's going to be a curse. They don't believe her, and she gets taken out. So basically, their one person who knows how to sort of quell this threat is gone. And they happily start to go through this tunnel. I don't know. I felt like the scene was done pretty well because basically they did exactly what you would expect anything to happen like what you would expect in this situation is that they send this big group of workmen in to start opening up the tunnel. And then all the screaming happens. So
well,
it's
actually,
like,
the first group was completely silent, right? And I kind of like
yeah.
that they go in with the construction vehicles and all the construction workers. It's super dark in there, though. I don't know why they don't have lights, like more like bigger floodlights. And then there's like conversations going on, and suddenly there's nothing. And that one dude trots out all with his guts hanging out, and I thought that was pretty good. And then Tiagi is like, I'm going in, Sarohi, and you and your team of 4, scrubs, you can stay back here and guard the civilians. That one goes fine too. They're kind of doing that thing with aliens where their body cams are what your perspective is, and we get our glimpse of the big bad from behind.
Yeah, I thought that this was like, you just see kind of like this British soldier with like a cape and a hat and stuff, and that was kind of good. I also like that the way that this was shot I thought was pretty clever. And the one thing I will say though is that if you've got a whole group of workmen that went in, one dude comes out with all of his guts hanging out, I don't know that you're just going to send in a smaller group of people. I think at this point they don't know what they're dealing with. They're assuming that there's basically Noxals in there with like artillery or something, so they don't really think there's anything weird going on. Although, I mean, man, the dude's guts are hanging out in the way, like when the workman comes out, like this doesn't seem like a normal battle, so I thought that was kind of weird. I did like how Tiagi went in and took charge, and then but I didn't fully believe that Vikram would go in just with Hawk at that point.
Well,
so
Alhu,
that was
again, Alhu is being like, "Don't go in there, don't do it. This is a bad idea. We should."
She's like the Jiminy Cricket of everything. No, but she's like the Cassandra, I guess. But it's like Hawk is trying to be a hero because he really looks up to Vikram. Vikram also has that kind of relationship with Tiagi, so I get why he would go in after her. I just don't get why he would go in with just one person. So that was kind of strange. I do like how when they managed to find Tiagi, her hair's totally white. That was like a pretty good scene because you get to kind of see a little bit of the talents of the big bad here, which I thought was cool.
So her hair is white. She's looking at the ceiling. They look up at the ceiling. The inevitable. There's a bunch of guys up there facing away, and one of them turns around. That's laughable. I'm sorry, but those are the bad effects that I'd seen in the trailer. These like big eyes, they have fangs. It just looks like prosthetics.
They try to do it really quickly so you can't see, but it's not quick enough. It still looks pretty bad. But I didn't mind it. There's a level of cheesiness that I'm cool with here. I do think if it had been a little bit more scary, that would have, like, you're not gonna, because it was definitely, like, I kind of laughed when I saw it.
Me too. I guess I don't feel like I should laugh in a zombie movie. And
what bummed me out about that is that then, when they're running away from them, that could have been such a cool scene, because if you're really scared, or if it's like really, if they had kept that sort of tension, I think it would be a much better show. And you basically have the soldiers, or the British soldier zombies, chasing after them. It's very dark, so you can't really see a ton of what's happening. Hawk gets injured, and then they manage to make it out of the tunnel, and they're just like, run, and they run to the only place where they can really go, which brings us into the second episode.
Because all their trucks have been burned. The villagers have gotten away from what's his name? Vadav, I think, or something like that. He was their medic. And also, during this scene of them running through the woods, once they've identified the barracks or where they want to go, they're getting shot at by muskets.
Yeah. I know, and I actually really loved that. I thought that was cool.
Those effects were well done, but you just have to get over the fact that these zombies are shooting muskets and be okay with that.
Right. But, and they're all over the place. It's hard to see where they are. It's hard to see how many. They still don't really know what situation they're in, because only Vikram and Tiagi and Hawk have actually seen what's in the tunnel. So everybody else just thinks, oh, maybe these are just the rebels coming after us. And then when they get to the barracks, they realize that the barracks are closed off because the two villagers that we had seen earlier, the woman and who we find out is her husband. I had assumed he was her father too until
well, you and Vikram had that in common, apparently.
She basically has locked them out, and they managed to finally get in, but not without losing Sanvi's mother. And the sort of silly thing here is that they basically not let him in, and they're like, oh, if anybody's injured, we can't let him in, and then they do anyway, and it's kind of weird.
They don't let them in. Alhu just shoots through the door, a metal door, whatever. I'll suspend disbelief. They get in, and then weirdly, the two villagers drag Sanvi's mother away while they're like getting inside. And I don't remember. It was chaotic, but it's kind of weird that they could successfully drag this woman away while the rest of the soldiers are coming inside. There are approximately 8 people in the survivors group.
Yep.
Ish. Right, but this is where you're starting to try and this is also the beginning of the second episode. The first episode basically ends with them outside going, what are we gonna do? Musket volleys, and then they get inside in episode 2.
And then episode 2 is much more like basically unfolding what the curse is, what the rules are.
There's a fair amount of exposition in episode 2.
Yeah. And this is where it slows down a little bit. I do it's very dark in this particular set, but they use that to their advantage. It's all basically the old barracks that are still there, the British barracks. And one of the things I like just in terms of like a set piece is that like there's old like cannons hanging out and cannonballs. There's and apparently the holy woman, the auntie, the wise woman of the village had been living here, ostensibly to protect them from Betaal, the colonel. But it's sort of cool because you can see where the living quarters have been set up, but it's also like this weird archaeological site too, which is I just like the idea of this as a set. And where they are in this world and trying to explore it. There's lots of dark corners. It's definitely creepy. They set up on like weird cots and like things that are just sort of left over. I think the question is whether any of this stuff would still be there given how we've seen, the climate in India is not exactly good for archaeological finds because there's just so much rain and heat and stuff. So I find it somewhat questionable that this stuff would still be there, but hey, we'll give it to them.
No, that's a fair point. This place, it's not exactly hermetically sealed. It's
right. But the nice thing about it is that there's lots of it's kind of maze there's lots of different compartments. And the good thing about how it's set up is that in terms of how Vikram's story unfolds, it's very easy to make him look like he is going insane because nobody's witnessing the things he's witnessing. He gets the information from the villagers about how the rules work. He at first also thinks that they are insane because they basically staked down Sanvi's mother. And he's just like, you're barbarians. And they're like, no, because anybody who's injured or I guess they also, if they're hit with what they call the cursed
demon bullets.
Basically, it's the normal zombie rules. So anybody that's been touched by this is going to turn into a zombie. And we see how Hawk is sort of deteriorating.
The two other guys from Tyagi Mam's team who had stumbled out of the cave before Vikram went back inside have both expired, and their medic Vadav, I think is his name.
Yeah,
is looking them over when they start to make popping noises. And he just I know that it's a movie. He looks really uncomfortable when they start opening their eyes, but it's 5 minutes later. He's starting to get out of there, but he's doing it really slowly, like he's walking away from a bear, like that video from Italy. Have you seen that video from Italy?
I saw that video and I was just like, oh, this isn't. Why are you filming this, man? I don't know. And anyway.
So Vadav is walking away from the bodies of his former comrades, like he is that kid walking away from that bear, super slowly, looking over his shoulder a lot.
Yeah.
And it's not the right strategy, it turns out.
Yeah. Also, Tiagi is somehow taken over as well. Like she's doing this weird stuff. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I do like. So basically, there's this weird sort of communication or feedback on the radio, on the walkie-talkies, and she's starting to make that noise. So somehow she's connected with Betaal too. And she makes a really creepy comment, like in the walkie-talkie. Basically, they're demanding that the little girl Sanvi get turned over to them, and she makes some weird comment that Sanvi's like really sweet, and we see an interaction with like Hawk is like as he starts to deteriorate is like looking at Sanvi in a really
Mm-hmm.
creepy way, and so there is that aspect. So really, in the group of people that's kind of left, only basically Alu and Vikram and who is the cousin? Sorry,
There's
uh,
Hawk, Akbar.
Akbar is the those are the only three people, and I guess Sanvi's dad, but her dad is actually like he's talking to the walkie trying to negotiate, and he's gonna like hand over his kid, what
He's
it
not
sounds
super
like.
shaken up that his wife has been killed either,
No,
right?
no, he's not a very good guy.
That's why he's the main baddie in after Batal, probably,
Yeah.
or the Colonel line of Doc. But you
Yeah.
also have these two other guys, Kanji and Kashao, are
Yeah.
these two other soldiers who have barely gotten any screen time, but every so often they get mentioned. And then there's I think his name's Banu, who is Mud Halvin's bagman. He's the one who had the
Oh, yeah, that's
explosives
right.
in his backpack, and he's kind of like Sanvi's extra uncle. But that's basically who's left. And then you've got husband and wife who are. I feel like husband's got to die because he has not had a lot of lines either, and he's still alive at the end of episode 2. But definitely his wife is a little badass with her scythe and her
Yep.
tattoos.
And also, she does have a little bit of knowledge about what to do, but that actually all falls apart. But basically, turmeric and ash and fire are
It's very
things
effective.
that hold these things off. And they're going into monsoon season, so that was like actually kind of a nice thing, is that we know that their protections are going to be taken away. Like so she's like trying to hold the powers at bay, but what are you gonna do? I do like the as I said, I think showing Vikram, because Vikram kind of discovers this stuff. He discovers that the dead soldiers have reanimated, and he actually rescues Sanvi from him. And I will say that is like the scariest, like kids who are scared of monsters on the bed, or on the, like having them like climb up the ceiling and stuff, and then have it be under the bed, the other guy under the bed. That was like pretty good.
That was pretty good.
That was pretty.
Yeah.
That I liked. I mean, it's meant to be like what it is, but I liked that, and I actually really like Sanvi as a character. I think she's like, because she throughout this whole thing, even before any of this happened, she noticed that her father and his bagman, whatever he was, were the ones that set up the villagers. She was very upset by what was happening to them, and she calls out her father actually on it, which maybe is why he's so willing to negotiate with Betaal to kill her or something.
Yeah.
But she basically is like, "Why did you do that? Why are you trying to kill them? And I saw what you did." And he's just kind of like, "Oops, got caught."
Let's
So
let's change the subject. There's also a really good. Well, it's a pretty interesting scene between Sirohi and Hawk. Hawk is turning, but he hasn't turned completely in this scene. Sirohi is like,
yeah.
"Oh, who's the best? Hawk, you are, Hawk." And he's like doing this whole hype man speech as he reaches behind him for he doesn't even look. He just picks out a syringe. He has no idea, I assume, what's in it. And he's about to do something to Hawk with his syringe when Akbar comes in and is like, "Nope, you
Yeah.
are under arrest." Akbar's just been kind of a jerk this whole show.
Yeah, but I mean, look, the nice way they played the story though is that like Akbar comes in and Vikram looks totally psycho.
Oh yeah.
Like he's about to kill his cousin. Come on, man. And so I like how they played that, and how they basically take Vikram out of command, because he seems like he's like kind of going off the deep end.
But you look at Hawk's wound, and it's like bright green bits are coming out. Obviously, Akbar hasn't had a look at it, because all Vikram has to do is have one look at this thing, and he's like, "Oh man, this is not good."
Yeah, but I think one of the funniest moments in this entire thing was when, so Alu's in charge now, and she asks Akbar whether she's like, "Hey, we gotta like motor out of here. We gotta get out of here." And is Hawk okay to travel? And Akbar's like, "Yeah." And then it like cuts to Hawk, and he's like puking up like horrible thing, like it's
Yeah.
bad, and like
He
it's like,
basically
oh,
dies in that scene. Yeah.
I know. And it's just like there is definitely like a comedic aspect to that. But in a dark way, obviously. But it's so I thought that they did a really nice job at telling that particular story, and also making Vikram, who even though we know he knows what's happening, he seems crazy to the rest of them, and so only when like even up until sort of the end of this episode where he's they think Vikram's crazy and Hawk comes in, and there's definitely something wrong with Hawk at this point. There's this standoff between like not a standoff, I would say
It's
kind
a
of a standoff. Yeah, it's a standoff. Like Hawk basically we know the audience knows that he's dead or undead at this point. And he doesn't look right.
And he's doing the whisper thing, and well, not even a whisper.
Yeah.
He's saying it just perfectly, like, conversation levels. Kill them all. Don't think about it. Kill them. Just kill them. I'm like, all right, no, somebody should be questioning that behavior.
But and I mean, Vikram's just like, just take his pulse. Take his pulse. And the poor guy who they're telling to take the pulse, that guy looks like the last thing in the world he wants to do is take Hawk's pulse. And it's really, the standoff goes on a little long, but there is a humor, to me it was humorous. And then, obviously all hell breaks loose, and Vikram is able to, now they've all seen it basically, because Hawk turns in front of them and tries to kill the
he
soldier.
rips off Kanji's face.
Yep.
I think Kanji is out.
Done.
One less person to try and figure out who's in the cast. I think it was Kanji, because they yell Kanji after it, and then it starts to rain. The turmeric lines are put on, the fires put out in the effigy or whatever outside, and then we get a zombie drummer boy scene.
Yes. We forgot to talk about the scene between Tyagi though and Mudhalvan, where they find the giant journal of Colonel Lindock.
That's the one artifact that I think is extremely unlikely would have survived the 150 years or whatever.
Also, man, this dude's journal is massive. It's like the size of 3 encyclopedias put together. It starts out pretty dark. I mean, it's at the beginning, and he's talking about, feeding appetites or taking over, with appetites. And this is, right at the beginning. So I just have to have a feeling it's not going to get any better within this book.
It's like God is your own appetite? Something along those lines.
Something like that.
Turns out Tiagi's pretty good at reading Old English. Mudhalvan is having a much harder time. And I did enjoy the way that this goes back and forth. I mean, that's kind of just how my experience of being in India was that, you there's a lot of switching back and forth. And that happens in this also. It's helpful in a way, but it's also, you gotta stay nimble.
Yep. And despite some of the effects that we didn't like, I would say I'm enjoying this so far. So I'm looking forward to watching the next 2 episodes to wrap it up.
I think the story is good. I think, maybe I'm having a problem with the practical effects, some of them anyway. And the story it's original enough, and it's entertaining for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So I definitely recommend it at this point anyway. I'd have to wait and see the rest of it before giving my final assessment, but it was different, and I like it. And, the effects, I felt like they were doing that in somewhat of a deliberate way. I feel like this was sort of a little bit of an homage to some of, the practical, cheesy effects, as opposed to doing all, CGI. I feel like had it been tweaked just a little bit, it would have been a lot more successful, but that's just me. So maybe some other people would enjoy it a little bit more. Anything else to add before we jump off?
Not really. We've got 2 more episodes that we're gonna cover next time, and I think we're gonna see a lot more of the red coats. So I'm looking forward to that.
All right. So if anybody has watched this or watched the first couple episodes, send us a note to tell us what you think. Reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com is our email address. Reanimatedpodcast.com. You can leave a note on our site, or you can tweet at us. Reanimatedpcast is our handle. So until next time, be safe and ciao.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening.